In today's episode, I speak with Brad Madigan, Portfolio Manager and Wealth Advisor with Scotia McLeod, one of Canada's leading wealth managers. Over the last 10 years, Brad has built up his wealth practice focused on providing investment, tax, and estate planning support to Canadian business owners. While this podcast is focused on careers in commercial banking, there is a lot that we can learn from the wealth advisory industry when it comes to going the extra step and adding value to business owners beyond just the banking products that you can provide. To truly become an advisor to a business owner means understanding and being able to talk about the key issues that affect business owners, including tax and wealth planning. The reality is, business owners run their businesses not to work, but to build wealth for their families. So part of any banker's job is to advise owners on the wealth that they are building and what to do with it. That is why I wanted to bring Brad onto the podcast. He brings a different perspective that commercial bankers need to hear. In addition, we go into detail on a couple key skills that can make you a better banker, including how to run a meeting, the types of questions you should ask when meeting with owners, and also how to cold call, a key skill that many bankers don't have and is a way that you can stand out and drive more loan growth for your book of business. So welcome to the Inside Commercial Banking Podcast. Here is my conversation with Brad Madigan, Portfolio Manager at Scotia McLeod. Welcome to the Inside Commercial Banking Podcast. This podcast is for commercial bankers that are in the business of lending money. My mission is to empower the commercial banking community by sharing best practices and the secrets to success through interviews with rainmakers and deal makers in the sector to help you fast track your career and achieve long-term success. My name is Robert Bazet, and I started my career in the commercial banking sector. Today, I'm a middle market M&A advisor helping Canadian companies sell. Thank you for listening to this podcast, and be sure to check out my YouTube channel, Finance Kid, for more content on commercial banking and M&A related topics. So let's jump into today's episode. Brad, how you doing?
I'm good.
Fantastic. You know what? It's a beautiful Friday, and I'm sitting here talking to you, so I couldn't be better. I'm very excited to bring you onto the podcast. You're actually my first wealth advisor on Inside Commercial Banking. And so for the listeners, why would I bring you on here? For two reasons. Number one, oftentimes commercial banks have a wealth advisory arm to their business. And so oftentimes there's an opportunity to partner with the wealth advisor to drive business, to uncover new opportunities. And I remember when I was a commercial banker, I didn't really leverage that resource as much as I should have. So I think this is even for me going back in time, I probably should have listened to this. And then number two as well, from a direct sales point of view, I don't think we can hold a candle to the wealth advisor channel. You guys do an amazing job of going directly to the business owner, uncovering opportunities, hearing their story, and ultimately driving sales towards your book. So I think there's a couple different angles that be really relevant for our commercial banking listeners. So I'm very, very excited for you to be here.
Happy to be here. And it's funny, you use the word sales. And I think it's interesting because a lot of our discussions going to be less about sales and just more about ultimately when you're helping people, solving problems, identifying where there's improvements, you're really not selling. You're just showing them ways to improve. And, if we can maybe put it in that context on the commercial side as well, I think if you start to look at it that way, it becomes easier.
So I love that you said that. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about my experience. So when I left commercial banking to move into mergers and acquisitions, I had to mentally shift my mindset from working on an annual budget, delivering annual loans, to more of a longer term planning type relationship, more of a strategic relationship around looking at a business owner and saying, maybe you won't sell today, you'll sell 5 years down the line, but that's not a bad thing. And I think that, that's one of the things that when you're in banking, you're kind of trained to look at it in terms of yearly increments. But if you just take a step back, and I think wealth management is like that as well, where you're very long-term, that's probably where there's a lot of learning as well, because sometimes maybe you're prospecting a lead that won't land this year, and that's totally fine. But if you're going to be here next year, then that's a lead that probably still want to prospect and deliver value to.
So
That's exactly right.
It's such a longer opportunity to help people.
So I love that you corrected me. You're dead right. It's not sales, it's value add. I think that's totally fair. And that's something that most commercial bankers need to hear. At the end of the day, yes, there's a sales element to the job, but to succeed in sales, you actually need to not think of it as in sales, but more value add. So we're already learning something 2 minutes in. Okay. So As always, I kick it off by maybe just taking a little step back and tell us about what you do, what your role looks like today. What does an average day look like so that the listeners understand what you do?
Of course. So I'm a portfolio manager and wealth advisor is the title. Really what that means is we're stewards of capital for high net worth families. We can't give legal or tax advice. I have a CFP, certified financial planner, and a CIM that allows me to manage funds discretionarily for families, a form of proven accreditation on the investment side. And really, what that allows us to do is seamlessly build financial plans, merge financial plans, and actually start to construct portfolios that make sense within a risk tolerance for clients to achieve their goals. That's maybe a lot of like formal jargon, but it's truly what we do. And then it kind of becomes once we set someone up on a quarterly, semi-annual, annual, whatever the client kind of chooses. We have some clients with higher touch points. It's check-ins to make sure that we're on track, that we're doing the right things. If there's a family asset that's going to be gifted, and how do we do it efficiently? How do we build wealth efficiently? How do we think about markets and positioning efficiently? It's comprehensive, but it's fun. It's never a
Yeah.
boring day.
And so how would you percentage wise of your time, how would you allocate between managing existing clients versus managing more of the outbound and the outreach versus building projects and all that? Because in commercial banking, you kind of have your existing book of business, which is no different than wealth. And then you also have the responsibility of driving new clients and new lending relationships, which I would assume is fairly similar.
True. So I think that also changes over time, right? When I started 8-ish years ago, maybe even further back, 10-ish years ago, as a planner, I was purely servicing clients, learning from other advisors as a financial planner myself, which was great experience. Understood what advisors were doing well and where I thought I could maybe improve upon the process of financial planning in alignment to portfolios. And then my first couple years in the business is very much aggressively finding clients that you can actually help. So cold calling business owners, working with key accounting partners, lending partners, anyone else within the bank or in my network to find opportunities to help add value to people, educate them on what they might be missing and show them solutions that they might not have seen before or been aware of, or might have heard of, but didn't really understand. We put complicated things in very much layman terms. Over time, my day to day has definitely changed. It's obviously a lot more client management, which is great. It is a lot more financial planning and alignment to portfolios. So a couple hours of market research and trading a day, a couple hours of client meetings a day, which tie into the trading and the research, a couple hours of spending time with valuable people that we can find ways to help clients together potentially, or obviously potential introductions to new potential clients. And really just, it's funny, had a chat earlier this week and someone comes in and they sit down and they're like, how can you help me? What can you do for me? You know, rookie Brad 8 years ago would have started going through all maybe the ways we can help a family. But at this point, it's really, well, help me understand your situation and where your pain points are. And I'm going to start solving them one by one. The day-to-day operation improvement to me is the tip of the iceberg. We can solve problems at banks and banks can be clunky at times and we understand that, but then taking it steps further to actually be forward-looking and strategic and maybe an advocate with them and for them, with their lawyer, with their accountant to help make sure everyone on their team is looking forward.
Yeah.
And that's what we do every day.
I love that answer because it really touches on everything that we're going to talk about. And for me, I remember when I was a junior banker, I felt like I was a blunt instrument. I was just like, where's the debt? Let me go find the debt. Let me put out the debt. And that's it. And there was no strategic thought behind how to approach meetings, how to run meetings, how to think through value add. And your superiors, they tell you, oh, find the client issue, find the client problem, solve for the client problem. But you're incentivized to put out money. And so you just think, okay, where's the lending opportunity? So to me, this is where this whole discussion is going to center around all the extras that really do feed into becoming what is the goal of this podcast, which is how do you become a rainmaker, deal maker in commercial banking? And how do you be more strategic?
True.
So we'll get to that. So maybe let's just take a step back and say at the very start, so rookie Brad, tell us about the client. Tell us about how you got into the business. How did you start building your book? What were some of the lessons that you learned there? Tell us the start of your journey.
So it was a lot of cold calling. Basically, I'd put it down to 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, between 8 and 10 a.m. and 4 and 6 p.m. That's when they could generally catch business owners, at least the ones who were working hard on their business. And typically it's a family business. And typically it was maybe a little bit more manufacturing centric type business where they're doing a lot of hours to make it all happen. And ultimately I was calling 4 hours a day, give or take. I was less focused on the amount of calls and more focused on high quality offering in the calls to make sure that I understood and communicated effectively. Number one, could they even benefit from our service? So qualifying them by the end of the call, but starting with an offering of help me understand what you're doing today. And obviously getting someone to open up over the phone about finances is very difficult. And
Yep.
honestly, you kind of need to reach a special person who's willing to have that conversation. And you can only go so far on a phone. And really, another couple hours a day, we're focused on educating myself. So working with super high quality accountants, super high quality lawyers, making sure that I understood every question I was going to face before I faced it. And part of cold calling I found was understanding the common misconceptions. I don't believe in RSPs aren't a religion. You don't have to believe or not believe. It's just a tax planning tool. It's a way to not pay 53.5% tax if you're earning over $223,000 of income in Canada in 2024. And it's
Yep.
kind of that simple. So these are the types of things we look at and think about. And, 8 years ago, Brad was very much making sure we were prepared for every conversation. And then I think as your career progresses and you're able to actually solve problems and implement complicated structures that are now common sense day to day, but at the time, there's a lot of moving pieces for the average person, let alone the accountant, advisor, lawyer who are implementing. And it's nice when it comes full circle and you see the impact on a family, you see the tax efficiency that comes through, you see how the family now has more ability to grow wealth.
Yep.
And ultimately, a lot of those opportunities stems from someone on the other end of the phone call being willing to chat. Yeah, I am pulling $220,000 in salary. And I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. And I'm open to learning. And then sitting down and kind of going through it.
I love that. And so if you were to look back, was there anything that you would have changed or any advice you would have given your younger self to kind of get there quicker?
Anything like getting quicker. Everyone wants a quick scale up start. I feel like I almost needed to do the calls to have the outcome. You always want to focus on more efficient activity. And that is always what I was trying to do. So optimizing your list so that you're calling maybe like the bank has some internal lists of revenue of businesses that they've helped in the past. And if it shows revenue divided by number of employees, obviously you want a higher revenue number per employee. That's usually going to be a
Yep.
pretty profitable business. That was for me a simple way to organize a list. And then to strategize on numbers that are actually direct versus maybe go to a desk and they never get answered. Cell phone numbers are obviously super high value.
Yep.
Or desk lines with, what are those where you can dial pound?
The dial tones.
Getting through call tree efficiently to the business owner. These are the things that helped me just be a little more efficient and
Yep.
took, 4 to 5 years, I would say. Maybe the first 3 were really difficult, a lot of calling, and then it starts to shift because you actually see the benefits. You have more to talk about on the value add. You can really
Yeah.
start helping people meaningfully. And at some level, your confidence is there. So there's no questions about your age. There's no questions about experience. There's
Mhm.
just ability to execute and people see you for the advice that you're giving.
And this leads us into the whole topic that I wanted to cover around, from a commercial banking point of view. When I was a commercial banker, I didn't see a lot of cold calling. It wasn't a big, arrow in our quiver. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity because now when I work with a lot of business owners, I would say 1 in 2 business owners that you call on, if you were going to ask them, are you happy with your bank?
Mhm.
Has your banker called you in the last month? Probably half of them will be like, no, I'm open to learning what's out there. So
Mhm.
really, there's an immense opportunity to actually go out and develop business directly from the commercial banking point of view. So how you call and how you position yourself, you've done that. And I think that the approaches can be applied directly to commercial banking as well. So maybe just putting yourself in the shoes of a young commercial banker, someone that has just been given the reins now. They're still managing their book. They're still the execution side, but now there's a little bit of expectation around origination. How do you
100%.
approach just picking up the phone and reaching out to a business owner? Tell us
I,
about that.
I think you gotta, and this is what I tried to do was take the common sense strategy that everyone is calling about, but put it in a more simple term in a simple way. So one way that I could think about if I were a commercial banker, and maybe a business owner is more open to this, how much cash year to year are you sitting on, Mr. Business Owner, as an operating drag, basically? Like you're earning $0 on operating cash. There are a way to give you the opportunity to be more efficient with funds, paying down personal debt, paying down or having more money in your pocket to compound in whatever investment, whether it's the market or not. Real estate was really hot until rates flew up. Is that not worth looking potentially at the opportunity? If you can grow money at 7, 10 over the last 10 years, and obviously that's through a really nice rate environment and some really good earnings lately.
Yep.
But if you can borrow at anything less than 7 and make it tax deductible, like you're kind of crazy not to. So do you have a
Yeah.
good reason on what? And this is not a very good cold call pitch, but I think that idea of thinking about giving a business owner access to capital, liquidity, being everyone says, I want to be your partner, but actually improving their service, actually solving their day-to-day banking issues, and then helping them see the bigger picture to build their family wealth. That ultimately, if they're working for $1 a day or an hour or a minute or a second, to help them maybe take literally 30 minutes out of their day to potentially make those dollars more efficient instead of banging your head against a wall, doing the same old and not thinking strategically. So helping them start to see the forest from the tree.
So one good area is really the year-end annual review, where you have an existing book of business and you have existing clients that oftentimes, one of the things that a lot of guests on the podcast have said is spend time building deeper relationships with existing customers, because that will drive more business in the future. They'll refer you to opportunities. There'll be more opportunities that come out of there. And so oftentimes as lenders, you look at the P&L and you say, okay, this is what you're cash flowing. This is what you can borrow. So that's the debt service side. But then there's the balance sheet side. And I don't think, for me, at least when I was on the commercial lending side, I wasn't really trained to look at the cash on the balance sheet and say, how else can I use that cash, invest that cash, reposition it to drive value for that owner? So maybe let's talk about a little bit. So say, for example, I'm a commercial banker. I have someone like you. Hopefully it is you if I'm in Toronto and I work for Scotiabank. It could be another wealth advisor. How do I bring you into that meeting and have a joint meeting to drive more business for the bank as a whole?
If you're trying to get a partner in the room, and honestly, it's not even about getting a partner in the room. It's just showing you give a shit to help this person grow their wealth, grow their business, be better. And I think you're almost showing that you don't care and you're almost narrow-minded if you're not thinking about this stuff or suggesting this stuff. Like, this is just good, I care about you type of conversation. And some things to think about. And the number one, a lot of meetings I start with when I meet someone is the first thing I can probably help you with. And I'm not a lawyer, but do you have a will? Do you have a power of attorney? To me, that's such a simple thing. Their business, their spouse, their kids, their employees would be so screwed if something happens to them and they don't have a will. Everything gets locked up. Government kind of steps in. It gets really messy really quick. And there's maybe even severance accountabilities if the business is going to get shut down. It's a nightmare for the remaining spouse. It's a nightmare for potential business partners. To me, this is like the easiest thing that is often missed. I don't want to put a percentage on it, but it happens way too often. And just to make sure someone has a personal will and a dual will for their corporation. Also, not even to mention the financial benefits of saving on probate 1.5%. So 15 grand on 1 million of value of a business. And we got to assume in Canada, Toronto, Ontario, there's value of businesses are much more than $1 million. So that's an easy one that you could also think about. It's hard because you don't want to overstep, but most business owners sign a summary of personal finance in some way, shape, or form. There's understanding of holdings in some way, shape, or form. And if anyone's paying 2-ish% on a mutual fund or has a mutual fund or is asking about markets, or maybe asking them if they know or if they've had a second look at making sure they're growing their capital efficiently. Maybe if they've had anyone help them on a second look of diversifying, not putting all their eggs in one basket. And usually the two baskets are their business and their real estate.
Yeah.
There's 9 other sectors out there, and maybe you should look at them. Real estate can be great, but also struggles through high rate environments. And businesses, let's face it, are cyclical. So how do you hedge that? If you could invest in a business that generates a 5 to 10% pretty stable return, and it's tax efficient, it's liquid, I don't know why not look at that? These to me are kind of the common sense starting points. And as a commercial banker, thinking about obviously making their lending efficiently, but I think you get crazy credibility when you can really take care of people on the side of service. You can then ask for referrals. They want to refer you because a high quality commercial banker who can take care of their client, and the good ones do, can then ask for a referral. And the business owner wants their friends to be well taken care of because everyone kind of in general complains about a retail bank experience. And if we can be that solution, we're the trusted network to help them.
Yeah. So I love that you said, because I've time and time again, I ask, like, how do you succeed over the long term? And most deal makers or rainmakers, they say the same thing, which is just go the extra mile day after day after day. So this is a situation where, instead of just going into a year-end credit review, doing the job, which is running the numbers, checking out the business, making sure that's everything's okay, and inquiring about how business is, taking those proactive steps to either ask the question, well, let me take a step back. Do you recommend that the question around investments, is that pursued by the commercial banker? Do you bring in a partner to then ask those questions? How would you, assuming you're someone that's a couple years into the bank, how would you position that conversation at your end?
I think it's just seeing if someone's receptive, it's sitting down. And I think if someone doesn't have a will, it's pretty clear that maybe they don't understand the importance of that. And hopefully my little ramble put some fear into people to understand the importance of wills. And if they're investing in mutual funds or ETFs on do-it-yourself platforms, we all see the commercials. Do they really understand the risk they're taking? Like bonds, long-term bonds got crushed 10 to 15% back in 2022 when rates flew up. And a lot of people looked at their do-it-yourself portfolio like, whoa, that was a low-risk basket. How did that get destroyed? There were things that we were doing way in advance of that to protect that capital more efficiently and more effectively. But I think really the question is trying to gauge receptivity, trying to create opportunity. And I think it's just kind of asking the questions, the basic questions of, do you have a will in place? Have you had a second opinion on diversification? If there were ways to pay less fees and make them tax deductible, would you look at that? And almost creating like no-brainer yes or no type scenarios where, yeah, that's probably the responsible thing to do. We could sit down and potentially in 15 to 30 minutes, save 10 to 15 grand. Is that maybe better time spent than working in the business instead of working on the business? These are the types of things that we can actually do. And I love starting a meeting with, okay, well, we've just done X, Y, and Z and you're 10 grand ahead already. And I know you're going to ask me about fees and we're already ahead. And so I think when you put these ideas in perspective, it starts to really build trust, add value, and show clients that we're here to help them. We're not here to sell.
So and one of the things that even for me, as I come up into business owners that I just meet for the first time, like most business owners look at tax as going to the dentist. Mm-hmm. They're like, I know I need to go to the dentist, but I don't want to go. It's something I don't want to do. I don't want to talk about it. My accountant's going to take care of it. And the reality is their accountant's probably too busy or, is not really being directed to do what they need to do because the business owner needs to really set the strategy and the tone. The preemptive questions, as you said, that list of a couple questions at year end and really asking, pointed questions around the tax planning side is key. Because one thing for me is I often come into businesses where the owner's in their 50s, mid 50s, late 50s, even 60s, they're banking with a big bank. probably worth a really small accountant, and they don't have a family trust. And so to me, when I ask that question, hey, do you know what a family trust is? Do you know how you can save tax when you are eventually going to sell this business many, many years down the line?
Yeah.
They're like, what's that?
Yes.
And so when I ask that question, I immediately win so much respect and trust. So for me,
100%.
it's a win. And I want to have those wins, but to really empower the bankers, if the bankers could do that when
Yes.
they're having their year-end reviews, I mean,
Yes.
how much more trust? Because that's the thing when you're young, and you're a banker and you're worried about credibility and, oh, I'm just coming in and I've just assumed this loan book and I don't really have relationships. The more you can build trust by being proactive, that's an easy way to get around the whole age and imposter syndrome that you have. Because
Totally.
the business owners can be like, wow, you're actually looking out for me just beyond your job, you know?
100%. You just struck a chord for me. Two things. Lifetime capital gains exemption. Every commercial banker needs to Google what that is, how to we are not accountants, we cannot give tax advice, but you need to at least understand what that tool is. And it's a tool, give or take, to give every business owner in Canada $1 million per business owner, per family member in the business to get potential shares out long-term, tax-free. Again, not tax advice. Work with an accountant.
So just to clarify, there's two ways you can sell a business, and so kind of going into my domain. So I'm getting
Love it. Love it.
So really, you can either sell the shares or the assets of a business. And in Canada, unlike in the US, majority of the business sales are going to be share sales.
Yes.
Meaning you're going to sell all of the shares, which encompasses everything in the business.
Yes.
And so when you sell the shares, if say, for example, one person owns all of those shares, then that one person has lifetime capital gains exemption of, right now it's about 1.25 million. It annually increases based on CPI, so the inflation index, and it will continue to go up over time. So in 2024, today, it's 1.25. And so really the advantage of A, knowing what that is, but then B, setting up a family trust where instead of the owner owning 100% of the shares are owned by a trust. And there are multiple beneficiaries within that trust. Say, for example, the wife, kids, grandkids, whatever the case is, you can multiply that lifetime capital gains across multiple people. So say, for example, you have 4 people in the trust. That means you're going to get 5 million capital gains tax free. And so that's where, again, it's unbelievable how many small business owners either don't know that, their accountant's too busy to talk to them about that, or they're years ahead. And so no one tells them. But the reality is you can set that up 10 years before you want to sell. And it's the right move to make because you're getting your estate in order, getting it ready for when you eventually want to pull the trigger and sell your business.
And this is where I find someone like you in the meeting or someone like me or a commercial banker, hopefully listening to this, can at least ask the question to at least start that conversation. Because I think you're right. A lot of accountants don't do it on purpose. They have good intentions. They're good people. They want to help. They're just overwhelmed. It's very hard for the accountant to look ahead for how many 100 clients that they're doing tax filings for. They're looking backwards. It's very difficult sometimes. And this is where we partner with the best of the accountants to be looking forwards, who are advocates with and for their clients. Because you're right. If you're constantly looking backwards and filing tax, there needs to be more. And this is where you, I, and other commercial bankers can be advocates to help look forward, to partner with the right accountants. I know there's a couple in our mutual network that we prefer because they look forward. They're young. They want to help. We're agnostic. We can work with the older guys too, but we need people that are proactive and care and look forward.
That's right. Okay, perfect. So I think that's where, just to finish off on that topic of year-end meetings, really you bring the, really from a business planning point of view, that's the table stakes.
Add some value.
How can you take the next step and add value and ask those basic questions? And you don't need to know the answers as a commercial banker. You need to know kind of surface level definitions, but 100%. Either you bring in a wealth partner like yourself, or you learn it and then direct them to the right resources. And by doing that, and the moment that they actually bite and they actually start to engage in that discussion, they'll realize, wow, that was really good advice. 100%. You're not just my banker that's financing my business. You're my advisor, which is the goal, right?
And then you become the person that's responsible for helping them answer questions that no one else has ever helped them with. If I were to retire tomorrow, how much can I live off of? That is something we can actually tell them within an hour conversation, snapshot, kind of back in the napkin, formal, legit CFP planning. But these are questions I think business owners go to bed thinking about, and they're just kind of working. They don't necessarily know. Like, it's so empowering to be able to tell someone you could retire tomorrow and spend 10 grand a month for the rest of your life to age 95 and still have your house left over. You're good, man. The rest of it's for your kids. Do you want to keep working? Is that a choice? Then it becomes a lifestyle decision and a mental decision. And to be the potential commercial banker to start that, think of how highly regarded you will be to help someone understand that if they defer their CPP, you can get 7 to 8%, additional gain per year that you're waiting. That's the lowest risk gain you can potentially get in the world. These are common things I think that not everyone's aware of, and to be educated on them is super powerful because it shows you care and it adds real value.
Amazing. Okay.
Love
So changing gears. Now
Love
we'll go into the tactical stuff. So let's talk about calling business owners. So this is something that I wish I had the chance to sit down with you when I was at Roynad, because there's oftentimes opportunities where I saw a business, I was driving by it in an industrial district, and I'm like, wow, that's a really nice business. I want to call on that business. I want to start building a relationship. And so historically, what I would do is it would be more passive, a little bit more chicken. I would do it over LinkedIn. I would be like, hey, Mr. Business Owner, just reaching out, would love to connect with you, would love to get a meeting booked. And so if the business owner is nice and they have the time and they're open to that, they'll accept that. But that's a very low likelihood of getting in front of the business owner. So actually picking up the phone is a better way to drive that conversation, start that conversation.
Did you have luck on the LinkedIn thing? Just understand. I tried that. I didn't get luck.
So let's talk about that. So I had a lot of luck because on the debt side, for medium-sized businesses, don't reach out to the owner. I usually reached out to the CFO because the CFO was strategic enough at that size, if they were big enough, that they would manage the banking facilities. And they were a little bit more proactive in saying, oh, well, I'm upset with my bank, so maybe I'll take this banker's call. So there was a little bit of that. My main source of business was actually driving value, as we're talking about here, and getting referred into other opportunities, not reaching out cold over LinkedIn.
Don't waste time on LinkedIn, maybe. Pick up the phone. Here we go.
Okay. So I'm a banker. I see that business. I'm targeting that business. Let's just call it ABC Inc. So ABC Inc., it's John Smith. How do you approach that? So when do you call? What do you say? Let's talk through that.
Yeah. So I would be calling, I think you have to call, and different things work for different people. I think what I had was 5 to 8 different ideas and different strategies. So depending on the potential profile of the business I was calling, again, usually calling between 8 to 10 a.m. mornings, 4 to 6 p.m. evenings. Sure, it's a little extra hours. Take breaks throughout the day to make up for it. And for me, it was a call on different ideas. So income notes could be an idea. I think everyone's chasing the idea of a high single digit or even double digit return. And we cannot make promises on return, but there are strategies that give you less downside. Income notes, for example. Income notes can pay you anywhere between 8 to 10 potentially with high quality underlying assets, companies like the telecoms in Canada, utilities in Canada, banks in Canada, or even more diversified. Notes are very unique and custom. I don't think this is a crazy original idea, but it does work. And if you can give someone the opportunity to maybe discuss the idea of diversifying high single digit return with less downside and potentially liquidity in a lot of cases, that starts to become very attractive. And then they maybe ask about the tax efficiency of that. And then you start to compare that against what they have elsewhere. And then they start to ask about fee and start to talk about the tax deductibility of our fee. So if someone says they're paying no fee, I loved that because it's hidden and they're not aware of it. And it's usually high if they're not aware of it and it's hidden.
I was just going to interject. So let's bring it more towards the commercial banking side.
Yeah.
Let's say the strategies are, I read an article that a business has recently built out a new facility, or, there are business milestones that they've either won an award, won a contract, built a facility, something like that, where there's really a business growth element, a business catalyst. And, you could call a business cold that there's nothing out there, but at least, if you're calling on, there's a milestone, at least you have an excuse to call, right? But I'm just curious from your point of view, as just generally calling and saying, hey, I'm with Scotiabank. Are you happy with your bank? Does that work? Or how specific is your strategy in terms of what you're trying to the value add that you're trying to sell or pitch or
I
advise
always
on.
think you're calling with an offering. And if it piques interest, then you're transitioning to understanding where they're at, where the easy improvements might be, and working backwards on how you can solve it. I wasn't just representing what I can do. I was calling representing my lending buddy on the personal side or the commercial side, or my accounting contact that I had lunch with in between all the calls, who educated me on lifetime capital gains exemption and family trust planning, who this person needs to meet if this business owner that I'm calling, because it doesn't sound like they have a clue. Or I'm also thinking about the estate planning lawyer that shared all the issues if someone doesn't have a will and they own a business.
Mm.
And when you can start to almost be the guy calling that represents all the people behind you that the client doesn't even really know is there. And I'm not doing it for a referral or a fee. It's just to help the person you're calling. And they need to legitimately feel that you are there to solely help them. You are there to solely improve their situation, make things better for them, almost as a peace offering of, if I'm able to fix X, Y, and Z for you in 20 to 30 minutes, imagine if we spend a couple hours together and you continue to grow your business and your kids need help. These are the areas. And I think it starts with an offering, a good hook. And I use the note example as a potential hook. High single digit return while diversifying, not being in your business or real estate, with less downside than traditional markets, which I think is important for a lot of people, because you want to avoid that stuff hits the fan scenario and you're selling when things are down 20, 30, or 40. That's just human nature. And we got to protect people from that. And that's really how we manage money and trying to be mindful of downside.
Okay. So that's interesting because, again, I'm just imagining my younger self listening to this and thinking, okay, how do I implement this in my business? The reality is, even before you start, you should most likely have a couple internal partners that you
100%.
sit down with and understand what they can add value to, and almost have a list. Educate yourself on the 5 to 10 things that you, as a representative of your bank, can deliver.
Yes.
Not just your division, not just what you're looking for, because that in itself, that selfishness, I guess, will be seen pretty quickly.
100%.
And there will be multiple situations where you'll pick up the phone and there's no real relevance to what you're looking for.
Right.
But how do you continue that conversation? How do you really continue to drive value? So you need to have those internal partners set up first before you reach out.
And education first, and almost 3 to 4 like super high quality bullets on how this person is going to help your client potentially, right? That's something I share in every follow-up after every commercial person I meet. Some simple links and hooks of where we can potentially improve things for the average business owner, and that they should be thinking about or looking at. And it's not just me, it's accountants and lawyers and everyone else.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. I think, that's the one thing where I guess there's the intimidation of calling, but then it's you get the person on the phone. How do you identify how to drive value? So let's get into that first 1 minute of the call. Because I think that's honestly, it's kind of like you're taking a breath and you're trying to figure out, how do I do this? Because how do you overcome that first minute of the call? Talk to us about, what do you say?
In the first 4 seconds of a call, you need to be sharp as a tack, enthusiastic as hell, and prove that you're an expert in your field. So when someone picks up the phone, you are sharp as a tack, enthusiastic as hell. Brad Madigan calling from Scotia. Do you have a quick minute? Most guys will maybe try to dodge and say no. And if they do say no, it's okay. Totally respect that. You're a busy guy, as am I. Is there a time? And give them 2 options in the next day or 2. 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, Tuesday or Thursday, which is better for you? Then you have a time to call and follow up. Ideally, they're not dodging multiple times. If they don't answer, that may be a dead lead. You can try that a couple times, at least make that yellow on your spreadsheet. If they are open to chatting, they have a minute. This is your opportunity to understand, or at least share your hook. So it could be about efficiency of building capital, moving money out of their company, potentially tax efficiently. Again, working with a professional accountant. Is this something you've ever heard of? Is this something that you've looked at? Do you have any potential ideas, or what are you kind of doing today? And if they show maybe or hesitation on what is this, there's interest. And that's when you have the opportunity. And we are professionals. We, again, cannot give tax advice, cannot give legal advice. we are professionals that need to sit down and understand their whole structure. And that opens the door to have that conversation in person where you can sit down with someone, help educate them on, hey, Mr. Business Owner. And some business owners do and don't know this stuff inside out. Here's how I'm a financial planner, so I know common sense numbers. Here's how corporate money works. Here's how personal money works. Here's what happens when you cross the corporate to personal line from a tax perspective. This is just cash flow financial planning. And if we can help improve things, if we can help look at making fees more efficient, making improvements on cash flow management, maybe pulling less salary or dividends or vice versa, RSP planning, TFSA planning, making sure cash is growing efficiently. These are all things that we can look at from a certified financial planning perspective, and we can start to add value. And usually all we need to do that is statements, birth date, balances. We can start doing projections, showing them where they're at today versus where they could be if they were to consider some simple tweaks and improvements. So compounding a couple percent return, the power of compounding is real. A couple percent return on efficiency of potential common sense tax numbers here and there, potential tax efficiencies just using simple tools that the government gives us access to, RSPs, TFSAs, RESPs, 20% match on dollars towards education for your kids, post-secondary. These are pretty easy planning tools to us that really start to add value over the long term.
Yeah.
So you ask what the cold call looks like. It's being sharp. It's giving them an offering. It's understanding when someone hesitates and their door's a little open, and then it's offering to go and sit down in front of them with coffee, with food, whatever, to make sure that there's comfort to have a real discussion of where's the potential improvement. Also being fair and upfront that we can only help you if you're at a certain size. I wish I could help everyone. So qualifying, not driving around the city, wasting time, qualifying them at the end of the call to make sure that you can actually help. That they're not too big or too small or too much debt already. These are things that you need to make sure you're respecting everyone's time, right?
And qualifying.
That was the biggest learning as a rookie. I took way too long to do that right. So you're having more efficient meetings when you're obviously in front of qualified people. Maybe there's your takeaway.
That's good. Okay. So that's really good because actually that's very similar to probably my takeaway, which when you're young and you're trying to build your network, you take there's a point where you kind of take your foot off the gas and recognize that what you've already built is going to compound on each other. So the network that you have, you should spend less time just chasing everything under the sun and more time building on the relationships that you currently have. And it's a little greedy, right? Because, you get greedy. You're like, okay, just one more. Let me get in front of more people. Let me chase every meeting. And then all of a sudden you've wasted a week chasing all these leads when if you just owned and worked with the top 10% of who you've already met, you probably will be further ahead.
And that's exactly what I did when things clicked in and it worked. And that's when business took off because then I was working with meaningful people who you can actually help and not just call. Because at some point, calling only gets you so far. You need to then identify who's qualified. And I hope this saves someone out there hundreds of hours that it would have saved me. Maybe you need to go through it yourself, but that is such a key learning and key takeaway.
I don't think a lot of commercial bankers call. So even if you are going to be the one that is going to call, you're in a unique position in that way because you're probably one of the few that are doing this.
True.
And recognize the power of that. There are other divisions within the bank that may be more focused on calling, but if you call from a commercial banking point of view, your hook is quite unique in that way. So don't discount the power of this, but strategically recognize that this is something that either you do because sales are slow and you need to generate some leads for, your year end. Or number two, you're early on in your career and you're just starting to build momentum. And this is an approach that you can apply, which most of the listeners of this podcast will be kind of 0 to 5 years. So 100%. When you're 30 years into your career, you're not going to be doing this. You shouldn't. It's healthy to.
Right.
By then you will have already had that network, right?
Totally. And maybe a simple commercial banker hook is, hey, Mr. Business Owner, and most guys I think have this in Canada. If you have a margin in your business of 10 to 30%, and I could give you an extra $1 at less than that, and it's potentially deductible, would you not be interested in growing your business further? Like, to me, that's an easy hook.
On your cost of financing or something
There you
around that,
go.
right? Where
Something simple.
interesting.
Like, I
Okay.
know you can take $1 and you can invest it, because guys tell me this all day and I get it. If I'm only, talking about a long-term high single-digit return, they're like, but Brad, I can invest in my business for a 20 to 30 or 40% margin. Great businesses. I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
Why would I give you $1, Brad? And if these guys could then borrow capital potentially and grow capital at double-digit returns, put your money where your mouth is. Go do it.
That's right. Well said. Okay.
There
And
you
then
go.
one last thing I just wanted, because this is something that I only recognized leaving the bank.
Okay.
You don't really appreciate the power and the visibility that comes with the brand.
True.
So when you just said that, hi, I'm Brad from Scotia. Do you have a quick minute to chat? You don't have to qualify what Scotia is, right? And for most people listening,
Sure.
that bank has a brand and visibility that really speeds up the qualification process in terms of you getting your foot in the door. So don't worry, it's less about who you are, because I think most people mentally kind of put up these walls and they say, well, I'm just calling this guy, I'm cold. He doesn't know who I am, but it doesn't matter because you're calling from a bank.
Yeah.
And so that work has been done for you in that way. And just realize that, it's not as hard as it seems.
So true.
I guess that's the main message I'm trying to get across. It's not as hard as it seems.
So true. And going out of your way, like I'm lucky where I'm at King and Bay. So I'm at the Scotia Plaza head office, right? Like, I'm on the same floor as Scotia management. I think that you're right. It comes with some brand recognition. We're in the tower. My partners are next door. I can pull a lending person if you need it. No different for the commercial banker. Our wealth management division is just up. I just had coffee with a couple of people who helped me on a couple ideas, and this is what they saw clients like you benefit from.
That's right.
I think that's fair. That's real. That's how we can help clients.
Okay, perfect. Just quickly as we're kind of recognizing the time here. So number one, from a motivation and sales point of view, and going back to that word, but when you put yourself out there in any type of role where you're in an origination role, there's a mental toll to that, right? There's an energy element to that. How do you find, yourself just managing your energy and just keep going and really kind of putting yourself out there?
Balance. And you learn the hard way. I remember every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, I would crash on the family couch. How do I keep going? Because you're literally throwing yourself out there socially every day, and not every day someone says yes or accepts the idea or pushes back on your idea. But I think it's key to have balance. It's key to surround yourself with people who are trying to achieve a similar goal that you are, that you're kind of on that journey together, and you're supported by people not only doing the same role, but other people no different than our connection, two like-minded people who help business owners in very different ways. And I think surrounding yourself with positivity and balance and some quarterly breaks, I think, are real. You need to have some downtime or something that gives you energy, stuff that you enjoy outside of. You also have to enjoy, I think. You have to make it a game. You have to enjoy the challenge of it, I think. And maybe for me, it was that longer term ambition of, actually running my own kind of business, having control over how planning and portfolio alignment looked, that motivated me, where I could wake up every day and dictate my own schedule. And maybe from a commercial mindset, it's, I want to build and work with groups of families that I can help on the debt side for many, many years, or maybe in another advisory capacity beyond commercial, potentially, who knows? But usually people that enjoy relationships genuinely want to stay in a relationship management capacity. So there's lots of opportunity if you can demonstrate in a bank that you can take good care of people and just genuinely help them, not selling. So balance, I think, is important. Doing it the right way with the right people around you. And the whole, how do I get there quick, usually isn't real. Usually it's illegal. Or maybe don't step on that landmine. And putting in the hours, the education, again, just genuinely caring and building yourself up.
So every single podcast, I say the same quote because it just reaffirms what everyone's saying, which is one of my favorite quotes is it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. There is nothing quick to this.
True.
There's nothing quick. Like it takes 10 years. And so what I'm trying to get across is that in a year or two or three, you're not going to be what you think you're going to be
True.
because there is always there. You're never going to hit there because your bar is going to keep going up and you're always reaching for the next thing. So just taking more of a long-term mindset, as you said, surrounding yourself with the right people, you're dead right. That is how you build a healthy career. And you just
And
work
we'll
with
be
people that,
celebrating along the way, like setting goals and writing it down and being like, whoa, this year was a really good year and here's what worked. And,
yeah,
like markets have been really good this year. And you kind of want to be able to share that with clients and celebrate that a bit,
yeah,
or like the milestone that you hit through, your multi-year career. I think you got to celebrate the little things, not for too long. You can't go around
yeah,
can't be a college football quarterback and think that you can just go to the NFL on everything you did in college.
yep.
You got to celebrate with a bit of a short memory and then be ready to get back to it on Monday.
Okay. So when you summarize this whole discussion and you're sitting down in front of a commercial banker right now, what are the common mistakes that you would say you see from commercial bankers that maybe you've come across in your journeys that can be
Yeah.
corrected? What are those mistakes and how do you correct them?
Yeah. I think the craziest thing that I see is not many people using agendas, not many people sending formal email, calendar invite, like having structure to how you operate with everyone. So there's consistency. There is no memory needed. It is easy to copy, paste, put in notes. It is easy to forward, here are the promised follow-ups and here's what I'm going to do for you. There was some training classes and seeing some successful people in the firm operate where I saw what they had in common was sharing an agenda in advance, going over the points, setting a time right up front in the meeting, making sure there's a mutual fit. Hey, Robert, is it safe to say 30 minutes here today is good? And kind of going from there. And if they say, oh, I got all day, it's okay. Well, if it's okay with you, about 45 minutes is a hard stop. So here's X, Y, and Z, what I was thinking of going through, but what's most important to you? If you can start every meeting like that, I think you're ahead of 90% of people. And then if you can then I think the magic, and it comes with experience, like dynamic and flexible enough to hop around that agenda and start tying those points together and then create a clean execution follow-up, a clean, if you're able to get me this, I'm able to get you that type of collaboration where you're not now just asking for statements. You're not now just asking for whatever you need to achieve your annual review checklist.
Yeah.
You're actually helping the client understand like this goes way beyond that, because if I can get you a couple extra $100 or $1 million on lending and you can generate profit at 20 to 30% margin, how much money is that? You did
That's right.
that.
Yeah.
So I think it starts to help everyone. And it also then demonstrates your value more cleanly, right? Like it shows that you're on your game. You're not screwing around. I've seen meetings where that goes in circles and there's no agenda and you hop all over the place from personal to business and starting and ending a meeting with some soft personal stuff's important, and genuinely caring about someone or making the personal jokes tied into the business in the middle is great.
Yeah.
I think these are important things that are missed. And yeah, executing is the biggest thing.
Yeah. So that's the first time anyone's mentioned this on the podcast, but in a way, you could almost rephrase that to say an agenda, it helps you seem in control
Sure.
and really lead that meeting. If you walk in, you're confident, you lead a meeting, you structure that meeting, you effectively achieve what you want to achieve. From the client point of view, they're going to look at it and say, wow, that person is really on their game. I want to work with that person.
100%.
And that came to me later on in my career, but I'm realizing it's perform. They can't really judge your technical skill set, but they can judge how you lead that meeting, how you communicate with them, how confident you are. So that agenda is really the base of you becoming much more efficient and structured in how you achieve whatever you need to achieve in a meeting.
I think it also leads to have successful people. So the second I sit down with someone and they're doing the agenda thing on me, it feels so good, so comfortable. It's okay. This person gets it. Like we're both busy, got lots of stuff on our mind, and this person respects me enough to be efficient with this. And ultimately I want to work with people like that. And I think the same thing happens when you do that for a business owner. They're like, holy crap, this guy reminds me of me, hopefully 10, 20, 30 years ago. This guy can really help us. This guy's going to take things to another level. He can help my kids. I trust them with this. I trust them with that.
Yeah.
Like it's instant credibility. And I think you're right. The imposter syndrome's real when you're young, starting out, despite the big brand behind you, and creates instant, like, this person's on the game. And you can just tell when someone walks into a room and has some confidence, and it gives you confidence because you have a plan. The client can go in 1,000 directions about the election or whatever else, but you have your game plan. So you know what to come back to. And it just creates a seamless conversation.
I love that. Wow. Honestly, the cold calling stuff was great, but this was the power of an agenda. I hope people can really listen to that, because that is such a basic, simple thing to do, but it really effectively helps create a lot of structure. It
Can I
puts you at a
also,
different level.
if you can do it a day ahead, so you're preparing for meetings a day ahead, you're sending a summary, it also gives you no anxiety morning of, because you have a jammed calendar. You have so many things to do, but you know you're not going into anything unprepared. So I have a tendency to be an anxious person, but there's no anxiety coming to work because I know I'm prepared and I know that everything in my control is in alignment.
Okay. So moving into one of the last questions here. So I asked everyone this question, and I'm very curious to see from your point of view, what's the most interesting, unique business industry you've worked with? Like, what have you come across in your travels?
The craziest, weirdest one that I walked in on from cold calling, and it was a numbered company, and it was near the airport. And I walk in, I triple check the address, and I walk in where it's definitely a sex shop. And it's not like a tiny little convenience store. This is like the Costco of sex shops. Well, and they're looking at me, I don't know, like the smile on the lady's face when I walked in a suit with all my, bag and bank stuff. Yeah, I've never felt more, you're in the wrong place, buddy. But turned out his son worked for Scotia. He was more just interested in maybe how we could help him or help his son, or I don't even know. But this is when I was not very good at qualifying. Since then, we dealt with a lot of cool businesses, guys that do really high-end furniture, really high-end lighting. We have like cool software businesses, cool businesses that solve problems that you wouldn't really think about, but they're there. Traditional manufacturing. We deal with a lot of different types of accountants, lawyers, professionals, doctors. So we see it all. And it's really actually, I'm lucky, recruiters. I'm lucky because I get to compare notes every day with a bunch of different business owners who see very different sides of the economy and say, hey man, here's the numbers I'm seeing. What are you seeing? And, the reality of what goes on in different industries. I'm super lucky, super fortunate.
Well, that's why we do what we do. Even in commercial lending, the reason why I loved it so much is you get to see all these businesses so deep and understand how they make money, and you learn new sectors every day. So that's awesome. Okay. Well, I can only imagine, hopefully, usually when you go in for a site visit, they kind of give you a free sample or let you test ride whatever they're selling. Did you test ride anything on the way there, or?
Man, I was like, I was pretty ready to get out of there. The second I walked in, I was ready to get out of there. And I had agenda, right? I didn't qualify. The whole environment threw me off. So it's just like, how do you be comfortable in that, or even joke about asking for a freebie for your friend Robert? But
you did me dirty there. Okay, perfect. Well, listen, Brad, that's fantastic. I think that most bankers, they don't really think about strategically building a team before going to market. It's much more reactionary. You go to market, you see something, then you're like, okay, where do I go? Who do I go to? So I really love the way you framed how you started going on the outreach side, what you would say, what are the things, the times of day that you'd call. So all of that was just awesome. Awesome. I'm sure there's a couple listeners that will take a lot of value from this. So thank you for making the time. I appreciate it.
Worst.
So I was going to ask, what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to connect with you?
So our website, bradmadigan.com, is an option. That's probably the easiest. That goes direct to my inbox. Send us a message on the right-hand side, get in touch sort of thing. That's probably easiest. And then we can take it from there and look forward to connecting with whoever might be going through all the same struggles.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, Brad. Thanks for making the time and have a great day.
Awesome, man. You too.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Inside Commercial Banking podcast. I love creating this content and I hope that you found it helpful. Now, can I ask you to do one quick favor? It would help if you could share this episode with your colleagues and like and subscribe to the podcast. The more exposure we can get on social media, the more guests we can attract. I hope this podcast can be the go-to resource for aspiring commercial bankers and middle market professionals looking to learn and grow. So be sure to also check out the Finance Kid YouTube channel for more content on commercial banking and M&A in the middle market. Now, lastly, if you are based in Canada and you have a client that is interested in buying and or selling companies, I would love to connect with them. Please reach out to me over LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and have a wonderful day.